my name is Eliza Leone. I'm the registered dietitian and wellness manager with Restaurant Associates. We do the food service on the HMS campus. So I teach these cooking classes once a month. There's always a virtual class monthly and also an in-person class on campus here. We always make the same recipe in both classes, so you're not missing out on any fun recipes if you just attend virtually. To those of you that are cooking along today, if you have a sushi mat, I recommend you wrap it in plastic, gently in plastic. And if you don't have one, that's okay. You can use parchment paper, or you can use a dish towel wrapped in plastic as well. Or some people just use plastic wrap. So if you have questions about it, let me know. Okay, so today is a very fun recipe. We're making sushi 3 different ways. That's very ambitious for the time we have. So if you want to just stick with one way, you can do that. But I'm going to attempt to show you 3 ways, see if we have enough time. And we're going to talk about sushi, all the different kinds. And yeah, the sushi mat stuff can get caked in there. So it's very helpful to wrap it in plastic. Let's see. So in addition to our sushi itself, we're making a Sriracha Mayo that can be like a drizzle on top. And then I also put in the recipe that you all received some other suggested accompaniments like pickled ginger and wasabi if you like spicy stuff. You know, the fillings, you can do whatever types of fillings you'd like, but the ones that I suggested for tonight are cucumber, carrot, avocado, and sushi-grade salmon. So speaking of the sushi grade, I'm going to talk about some safety tips right up front. So when I say sushi grade salmon, that just means it's like the top quality fish. So you know it's, you know, been temperature controlled from the second it came out of the ocean to the second it goes into your sushi or into your mouth. So that, you know, it's safe to eat as long as you get it from any store that says it's sushi grade. So that might be like specialty markets like Italy in Boston, I know has sushi grade fish, or if you get it from a sushi place or a sushi counter at a grocery store. You can also buy some frozen as well from grocery stores. So lots of different options, but if you're not doing fish tonight, or if you are not the kind of person that likes raw fish, you can also do cooked fish or omit the fish altogether and just do vegetables inside, tofu or something like that. Please make sure that you've washed your produce before we cut it, and also make sure that you've got a very sharp knife. This is going to be super, super helpful with the really sticky sushi that we're going to be cutting. You also want to have a little bowl of water handy when the time comes for that to make it easier for yourself to unstick the rice from the knife blade. And we're going to be handling, you know, we're cooking rice, so we're going to have some heat as well. So just make sure that you're careful using oven mitts and just be careful around the heat. So I'm going to give you a very brief overview of our process tonight. So what we're going to do first is wash our rice. I'll talk about why while I'm doing it. And then we cook the rice. Then we're going to prepare the what's it called? Sriracha Mayo and fillings and some other items as well. And then we finish our rice and we let it cool a little bit while we do some other things. And then we're going to make our sushi. So like I said, I'm going to show you 3 different ways. And I have Samantha, our marketing manager, on the call as well behind the scenes. So she's going to help. Hi, Samantha. She's going to be watching the chat. So if you have any questions throughout and you don't want to, you know, unmute yourself, you can use the chat. Or if you have any comments, please enter them into chat. And Samantha, would you mind showing the overhead real quick? So
absolutely.
We have this overhead camera that is going to be super helpful to see what I'm doing. And I created some kind of funny looking slides, but they'll be helpful to show you like the 3 different kinds of sushi and the way we're going to wrap it. So Samantha will help us with that when the time comes. But all right, I'm going to jump into it now to use our time wisely. So the first thing we're doing, like I said, is we're going to wash our sushi rice. This is dry sushi rice. I have brown short grain rice. This kind of rice is very, very starchy. And that means that when it's cooked, it can get super sticky. We want sushi rice to be a little bit sticky, but not so sticky that it just becomes one big blob. You want to actually see the individual grains of rice. So I'm gonna ask you all at home that are cooking along to put your rice in a strainer and rinse it under cold water. You can use a spoon to stir it around in the strainer pretty consistently. I have a big bucket here because I want to show you all how much starch actually comes out of this rice. So the way to know if you've washed it enough, so I have this basket here. It's like a pasta basket, and I'm just stirring the rice around. So that water was clear a moment ago. Now it's cloudy. So that's all of the starch that sort of sits on the outside of that rice coming out. So rice will still be starchy. Rice is a starch. Grains are starch. So we're not eliminating the starch from this. We're just making it less sticky. So you can see how cloudy this is. You can't even see the rice. You can't even see the spoon when it goes in further. That's how cloudy this water is. So I'm gonna wash this the rest of the way in the sink because it'll help it go faster. But what you wanna do is have running water, mix your rice around constantly. And once it comes out pretty clear, when the water comes out pretty clear, you're good to go. So I'm gonna turn around here and wash this in my sink. So if you're worried about what's going to happen if you don't wash it well enough, it just will be a little bit stickier. So we have some tricks to help you with eliminating stickiness, but this will help as well. So I'm gonna give this like 30 more seconds and then we'll be good to go.
Has anybody made sushi at home before?
Sorry, what was that?
Has anybody ever made sushi at home before?
Yeah, I wanna know. Unmute yourselves and let us know a little bit. Somebody's saying maybe a little bit.
I tried, but not very successfully. I couldn't get my mat to roll properly and to seal. And so I'm very curious to learn how to do it this time around.
Okay, great. I hope we can help teach you that.
I made it once before at home too, for
Okay.
a dinner party.
Oh, a dinner party. Very brave. Was that your first time making it?
Yes,
Wow. How did it go?
it was okay. It was okay.
Okay, so right now I'm scooping this rice straight into the pot that I'm going to cook it in. And I'll bring that onto the camera so you can see it. So the amount of rice that I put in the recipe that you all have is 1.5 cups of dry rice and 2 2/3 cups of water. So I'm turning my burner on to high now. And I'm gonna put my lid on to help trap the heat and bring it to a boil faster. But right now there's no other ingredients in this pot besides rice and water. That's it. We will be adding some other ingredients to the rice, but not just yet. Okay, so while this is coming to a boil, I'm gonna set it aside very close to me so I can keep an eye on it. But I wanna get going on the other items that we have as well. So, how's everybody doing so far? Rice in the pot, hopefully? Okay, let me know if you have any concerns. So, sushi rice is made differently than rice you have in other dishes. Sushi, you know, there's some not controversy, but some differing opinions about where it actually originated. But, you know, in today's culture or today's world, we know that sushi, you know, is mostly made in Japan. So Japanese cuisine is very much about highlighting all of the different taste sensations. So salty, sweet, sour, bitter. They also add spicy in there. What did I miss? Salty, sweet, sour. Oh, and savory or umami. So we are going to be combining some ingredients here to add salty, sour, and sweet to our rice. So what we have is, I'm gonna make sure I tell you the measurements of the ingredients here. So we have 1 teaspoon of salt. We have, this is 1 tablespoon of sugar and 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. So we are combining these 3. And if you're not, you know, if you're monitoring your sodium and your salt intake, you don't have to add this. However, I would recommend if you reduce any of the ingredients at all, rather than eliminate, then make sure you reduce them all equally. If you eliminate the sugar, but you add the acid and the salt, the flavors then don't balance each other out as well. So the sour from the vinegar, the salt, and the sugar all balance each other out in the measurements that we have here in this dish. So I'm whisking this to try to dissolve the salt and the sugar as best I can. So I've got some little granules still down there at the bottom, so I'm going to keep whisking this. But we're whisking this and we will be adding it to the rice when the rice is done cooking. So we're whisking it now and we're going to set it aside. So like I said, if the thought of adding sugar or that much salt to your dish is not something that you really want to do, you don't have to. You definitely don't have to. But if you eliminate those 2, I would recommend you also eliminate the vinegar. Or maybe just do like a splash of vinegar. Oh, my rice is boiling over. Okay, so my rice has come to a boil now. Well, I can't bring it over and show you because I can't move my burner. So I have it right next to me. You can see my pot is right here. My rice has come to a boil, so now I'm turning it down to low. I want to keep it simmering. And this brown sushi rice should take, you know, 15, 20 minutes to cook. So definitely keep an eye and make sure that it doesn't boil over. So just keep an eye on that nearby. All right, so I've got my vinegar, salt, and sugar mixture. That's good to go. I'm gonna set that aside. So you wanna make sure that all your granules are dissolved. I've got like a few little pieces left there, but that's all right. Okay, so that's getting set aside. And the next thing we're gonna do is make our Sriracha Mayo and set that aside. So again, don't have to add this. This is just preference if you'd like to. But I think it adds a really nice, creamy, a little bit spicy, salty addition to like a drizzle on top of your sushi. So we've got all the ingredients here. So this is, again, I'll tell you the measurements here. This is a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of mayo. So that adds up to 6, that's 6 tablespoons. We'd rather just do tablespoons. Then you have 1 tablespoon of sriracha. This is a hot chili garlic paste or sauce. You have only a little bit of sesame oil. Sesame oil has a very strong flavor, so you don't need to do a lot. We're only doing, how much did we say? 1/2 teaspoon. And then again, some rice vinegar. That's what we put into the other mixture. We're just doing 1.5 teaspoons of rice vinegar. So again, we're balancing lots of different flavors here. So you can just pour all these ingredients into one bowl. I'm gonna pour them all into the mayo bowl. And I'm gonna use my whisk again. Scoop everything into this bowl. I always think it's kind of a fun experiment to compare mixing something with a spoon versus mixing it with a whisk. I'm gonna show you that just for fun. So sometimes at home when I make a salad dressing, I get lazy or the whisk is in the dishwasher, not cleaned yet. So I'm like, oh, I'll just use a spoon. It's fine, it's fine. It ends up with a totally different product, to be honest. There's pieces of the mayo that are still, you know, like larger. Try not to say the word blob, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Larger pieces. But if you use a whisk, it breaks up those larger pieces and makes everything so much smoother. So I definitely recommend using a whisk if you have one. And this makes a super creamy, drizzly Sriracha Mayo. So that we are also going to set aside. And what we're going to do now is start to prep our fillings. So to do that, if you're following along, nori sushi, this is the kind, or nori seaweed rather, this is the kind of seaweed that's used for sushi because it's just like a big flat sheet. It's like paper almost. And it's always like a good standardized size. So whatever brand you buy, it's going to be the same size. So I'm opening up this pack. You definitely want to try and keep this away from the steaming rice pot because if this gets exposed to moisture, it can change the texture altogether. So I'm only going to take out one piece because I want to show you how we're going to make sure our sushi fillings are the right size. All right, so I've got one sheet. I'm going to put it far away from the rice. Okay, so you can see this is kind of, you can see my hand through it. It's translucent, kind of crinkly. There's a smoother side and a rougher side, but we are going to fold this in half. This is what we're going to be using later on for our sushi. We're going to be repeating this step. But when you fold it in half, if it's nice and dry and not been exposed to any moisture, it should come apart very easily. Break into two halves with very little effort. So this is the size of what our sushi is going to be. We're going to be putting it here and rolling it up from there. So to make sure our fillings are the right size, we want to make sure, you know, we're not cutting our fillings wider than the width of the sushi. So this is just a seedless cucumber. I'm going to cut the end off. And I'm actually going to cut this to be half the width of the sushi because we're not going to actually need to use very much. Okay, so I'm going to set my measuring nori aside. And I'm going to cut this lengthwise in half. We're basically going to cut this into skinny strips. Okay. So while we have this measurement, we can also take our carrot. Obviously, a carrot is not as cylindrical. It's more, you know, comes to a point. So I'm only going to use the skinny end. And I'm going to make sure it's the same width as the cucumber. So we've got all these pieces. I'm going to cut this in half as well so it doesn't roll away from me. There we go. Put it on the flat side so it doesn't roll. And here we go. We're going to cut this into strips, like I said. So the way you wanna do this is you can hold your cucumber, you know, on either side. Put the tip of your knife down on the cutting board. And slide it down. You're gonna kind of rock the knife downward. And I'm touching the blade afterwards so I can hold these slices in place. Because sometimes when you pull the blade up, it pulls the slice with it, but I don't wanna do that. So I'm just doing pretty skinny, these are skinnier than a 1/4 inch, I would say. And then what I'm gonna do to cut them into strips is tip them over on top of each other. Sometimes they call this shingling. You're shingling your slices. And I'm gonna hold these in place and again, put the tip of my knife down first and cut into strips. And you go all the way down the shingles to get to the end. If the shingles are a little bit tricky for you, then you can just lay the slices flat and cut those. But here are our cucumber slices. This is going to be our sushi filling. So we really don't need to cut that many. We're going to be making sushi that's on the smaller side. I'll explain to you during the process how you can make them bigger if you would like to. But I'm going to cut the other half of this. Everybody doing okay at home? Any questions? Everybody's good? All right, so I'm shingling this again, laying it down. Cutting into skinnier strips. Put that one down. But basically, we're cutting these into long, skinny strips because it just makes it easier when filling the sushi. So here we go. Lots of cucumber strips. Chefs sometimes call these matchsticks, you know, because the shape. All right, so I'm gonna do the same thing with this carrot. However, I'm gonna go even skinnier. Cucumber is soft, as you know. Carrots are not soft. So I want really, really skinny slices, as skinny as you can go. You could also take a shortcut with the carrot and buy shredded carrots. That's definitely an option. A good trick, if you're not very confident with your knife skills, is while you're cutting something this way, if you feel like the cut side is now wider than the bottom, you can flip it onto that wider side. So you have more stability. It's, unless you're like a French trained chef and you have like a, you know, another chef screaming at you in the kitchen to make it exactly perfectly right, you can just do this, it's easier. There's no need to risk cutting your fingers if you can find a shortcut. So I'm cutting this skinny as I can. And the carrot, because it's so skinny, I'm only gonna cut just this little bit. I don't even need this other piece with the amount of sushi I'm gonna make. If you are doubling the recipe, you might wanna cut the other part, but we've got some nice skinny carrots. All right, I'm checking on my rice. If you're cooking along, I encourage you to do the same. Get my spoon. So you can see, it's gonna steam up the camera, but there's little like pockets where the bubbles are coming up. So there's a little bit of liquid left. You can see it coming to the side. I'm gonna let it go a little bit longer. I'm gonna stir it, make sure it's not sticking to the bottom. But this short grain rice, it's not super high fiber, even the brown kind. So it tends to cook relatively quickly. So I'm gonna put this right back on the burner. Still keep the lid on, keep it on a low simmer, and I'll check on it again in a bit. So let's see, checking my time here. So the next thing we're gonna prep is our avocado. This is gonna be another filling for us. So again, this is more avocado than we need. If you're a big avocado fan and you want to have mostly avocado in your sushi, then go ahead and cut it all, or you can save half of it for later. So the way I'm going to handle this is I'm going to cut this in half lengthwise and rotate the knife around. And then you end up with two halves, twist it apart, pull it open. Got some brown spots, it's sometimes hard to tell, but we can scoop that out. That's nothing to worry about. I'm gonna remove this pit by chopping it with my knife. I'm pulling my hand away. Please do as I do. Don't keep your hand there when you chop it. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and then twist it, and it comes right out. And then carefully pull the pit off, and you're good to go. So I'm gonna grab a butter knife to cut this. Or something very, not sharp. This is just a disposable knife that we have in our cafes. The reason for that is it's easier to cut the avocado when it's in your hand. But I don't want to use this huge giant knife and then I'll cut through and cut my hand. So instead, something just like a butter knife is just as good. So I think what I will do first is cut out this portion because it's brown. Scoop that out. Right, and I'm gonna cut slices. Another good thing about using a butter knife is we're gonna be scooping this out with a spoon, and it's much easier to scoop it out if you haven't cut through the skin. If you accidentally cut through the skin, then it makes it much more difficult. So using a dull knife like this is much better than a big sharp one. All right, so these are skinny slices. And then I have this sort of bigger spoon that I'm using for the rice to get the rice granules off here. And if you have a wider spoon like this, that makes it a bit easier too. But I'm just gonna scoop it, spin it around, and there we go. There's our sliced avocado. It's kind of hard to tell it's sliced, but we're gonna shingle it. There you go. It's all sliced. So we're gonna do the same thing we did with the others. I'm gonna bring it a bit closer to me so I can cut it more easily. So we sliced it first one way. Now we're slicing it the other way. So here you can use the big knife because it's not in your hand anymore. So the ideal firmness of an avocado for this scenario would probably be like medium firmness. You don't want it to be too soft. This one is a little bit too soft, I think. But the softer it is, the harder it is to handle. But the firmer it is, the harder it is to cut. And it doesn't have as much flavor. So we've got our slices of avocado. It's getting wrapped up, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But a good tip to tell if your avocado, I'm gonna just set this aside, I'll put it in a bowl. A good tip to tell if your avocado is ripe is rather than squeeze it on the sides, like rather than squeezing it like this, you can squeeze it like this, top and bottom, because most people in the grocery store squeeze it this way. So if everyone else is squeezing it that way, everyone else is making it dented. So if you squeeze it this way, because you know the special trick, then you get a better idea of the firmness. There's also another trick where this one doesn't have a stem, but sometimes in the store they have a stem. You can pop that little stem off, and if it's green underneath, it's probably not as ripe, which maybe that's what you want for your use. But if it's brown, it's more toward the ripe side. All right. So I have avocado all over my hands now. I'm gonna swap my gloves out. I'm gonna check on my rice again as well, because that was almost done. Okay. Clean up my board a little bit. All right. Everybody following along? Any questions?
Does the avocado kind of get discolored unless you put some lemon on it or something?
The amount of time that we're gonna leave it here, it's not gonna matter as much. We're gonna use it very soon. But yeah, if you were gonna be not using it for half an hour or more, then you probably want to squeeze some lemon or some lime. But the amount of time we're doing, it's gonna be fine. Also, if you're not using the other half of that avocado, a good storage method is to wrap it in plastic and like form the plastic to the entire cut part of the avocado. So make sure the plastic goes inside that hole. You'd want to like have no air touching that avocado. You can also just like, if you have a flat container, just put it face down in the container. I've done that and left it for a couple days and it's totally fine. Even though a little bit of air is trapped where that pit was, it's not enough to make it, go bad. But you basically just want to reduce the oxygen exposure as much as possible. Okay, so my rice is looking great. And my sign that it's done is that there's no more water at the bottom and it's starting to stick a little bit. Not so much that I have to scrape it off, but this is definitely done. So now I'm gonna move my big burner out of the way so I have some more room. And you can get a mixing bowl, or you could just mix in your pot. But here's where we're gonna add our vinegar mixture. I'm gonna get a large mixing bowl because we also want to give our rice an opportunity to cool down a bit. We still have to cut our salmon, so the rice will cool while we're doing that. All right, so I'm just scooping all the rice into this big bowl. Okay, and I grabbed a different tool. This is a silicone spatula. If you have one of those, this is going to be helpful for this next step. But all right, we've got our rice. We have our vinegar mixture. I'm going to pour this over in a circular motion, trying to allow this vinegar mixture to touch as much of the surface of the rice as possible. And then I'm going to use my silicone spatula and like fold that in. I'm not going to be mixing like this really vigorously because like I said, this rice gets very sticky and very, it can get like mashed and we don't want that. So I'm folding this together. And the method, you might have heard that term if you've ever made like muffins before, but the correct technique for folding is to sort of like scoop around and flip it over. Scoop it around, flip it over. You want to make sure you get everything. You've touched all of it, but you don't want to over mix it and make it mashed up. So that's why a silicone spatula is a really great tool because it's gentle. All right, so I feel like this is pretty well combined. So what I'm going to do now to help this cool down is spread it out. So the more rice can be exposed to the air, the quicker it will cool. If you leave your rice in a big pile in the middle, then the outside will cool, but the inside is going to stay hot. So I'm spreading this out thin. If you don't have a large bowl, you could spread this on a sheet pan or on a big plate or platter. But spreading it thin. And then I'm just going to set that aside. And by the time we finish cutting our salmon, this is going to be cooled off. Not fully, but it'll be cooled enough to room temperature that it's totally fine to use. All right. So I'm checking my time here, making sure we're good. Okay. Awesome. So, salmon time. So, although this salmon is sushi grade and is safe to eat, we do want to be careful what we touch in our kitchen after we touch this salmon, because if those germs go elsewhere and sit there for a long time, that's how people can have cross-contamination and get sick. So what I'm gonna do, I'm wearing gloves. I would recommend you wash your hands afterward. I will also wash my hands afterward, and I'm gonna use the other side of my cutting board, or if you want to remove your cutting board after this, then you can. But this is a nice salmon fillet, the beautiful layers of muscle with the fat in between. This is gonna be so good. Okay. So what I'm gonna do, again, we wanna make sure that this is about the width of the nori. This is a little bit skinnier, but that's okay. All right, so what I'm gonna do is cut this in the middle, just like we did the cucumber. And what we're gonna do to cut that, I did that before I explained what I was doing. I didn't go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to cut it. I just went one swipe down. Fish is very fragile, so you always want to make sure that you're limiting the number of swipes with your knife as much as possible. All right. So also, obviously, this part of the salmon is taller than this part. So once we cut our slices, I may need to cut some of the thicker ones in half again. So we can do that when we get there. So we need to cut against the grain. If I cut this way, it would be a little bit too close to the angle of the muscle. So instead I'm cutting this way to help those pieces stay together. That fat in between can come apart very easily. So I'm doing about a 1/4 inch thick, one swipe. And then when you get to the very bottom, you can go back and forth to get through. So you're starting with kind of like the front of your knife on the fish, and you push down with your weight and you slide it through. So one swipe. Put that to the side. Now that I'm getting to the skinnier part of this fillet, I don't think I'll need to cut those pieces in half, so that's helpful. All right, so I'll explain again what I mean. The width of this is much skinnier than the width of this piece. So I'm gonna cut this piece in half. So that's basically everything that we've cut to go into the sushi has been cutting it into planks and then cutting it into matchsticks or strips. So we're doing the same thing here with the salmon. All right. So this fillet has the part where the skin was, it's still got some of this fat here. The color of it is a little bit gray. That's just the natural color of the fat just under the skin. You can remove that before you cut the salmon if you'd like, but it's got a lot of nutrients in there, a lot of that omega-3, heart healthy, brain healthy fat. So I like to leave it, but if it's visually unappealing to you, then you can remove it. All right, so here we go with the other part of the salmon. One swipe and down. One swipe. These pieces are very thick, so the swipe takes a bit longer. Swipe. All right. So like I said earlier, if raw fish in sushi or in other dishes, it's falling apart a little bit, I might just remove that. If raw fish is not something that you're comfortable eating, you don't have to add this to your sushi. And actually, while I'm talking about it, before we get into the next portion, when we actually start making the sushi, there are lots of different kinds of sushi. Sushi is sort of a catch-all term, but if you have, so one example is if you just have raw fish and that's it, nothing else with it, that's called sashimi. If you have raw fish on top of rice, that's called nigiri. If you have raw fish wrapped up with seaweed with rice and then seaweed on the outside, that's called maki. If you have, and I'll have, I have more information, then I'll give you all about this, but if you have, sushi, like a sushi roll that has rice on the outside and nori on the inside, nori seaweed on the inside, that's called uramaki. That's also referred to as inside out sushi. And then the last one of the ones that I hope we get to with the time we have tonight is, what is it called? Temaki. And that's a hand roll. That kind of looks like a cone. It's all the same stuff you put in sushi, but it's like a cone shape. So there are lots of different kinds. So I'm putting my salmon back into the bowl that it was in before, so it's nice and organized. I'm gonna set this aside. And here's where I'm gonna wash my hands, get rid of my knife, flip my cutting board over and wash the counter afterward. So I'm gonna make sure we're nice and cleaned up. All right, so if you're touching the salmon, if you're done with the salmon, I recommend you wash your hands as well. And the rice is definitely cooling down, so like I can tell just by looking at it, it's not as shiny anymore. So it's definitely getting cooler. But okay, I'm gonna wash my hands. So Kelsey and Camber, how are you guys doing? I see the rice coming out now. Okay, so yeah, you can spread that rice out flat on a sheet pan or something, and that will help cool it down quickly. And nobody else was cooking along, right? I think it was just Kelsey and Camber. Perfect. All right, I'm gonna rinse this soap off. All right. So I'm gonna flip my cutting board over so I have a nice clean workspace. Time check. Okay, so it's gonna be tight. So I have 3 kinds of sushi we're gonna make. Samantha, would you mind bringing up the slides? So the first kind we're gonna make, first kind of sushi, you can see it here. I just mentioned it. It's called maki. This has nori seaweed on the outside, rice, then fillings. This one, I think, is this is probably the easiest kind of sushi to make, I think. So again, if you are following along, make sure you've got your sushi mat or your dish towel wrapped in plastic. And if you don't have those, you can use parchment paper. But here's my sushi mat. We have the ribs going horizontally. And I have my half a piece of nori that I ripped off earlier. Again, there's like a rougher side and there's a shinier, smoother side. It might be a little hard to tell over video. It's definitely not as shiny on the rough side. But the rough side is going to face up. That helps it stick to the rice. Okay. So I've got my rice here. I'm going to scoop a little bit of rice. Oh, and the most important thing, if you're making this, you need to have some kind of bowl of water to dip your fingers because this rice gets crazy sticky. So you can just keep dipping your fingers every time the rice gets too sticky. But all right, here we go. Actually, I know at this point, I'm going to take my gloves off because it's way easier with no gloves on. Okay, so getting my fingers all wet, getting the rice here. It's maybe about a 1/4 cup or so, maybe a 1/3 of a cup. And I'm spreading it all the way down to the bottom. But the top, I'm going to leave a little bit of space, like a 1/4 inch of nori unused. So I want to get all the way out to the edges. And you don't want so much rice that you can't even see any of the nori through. You want it to be kind of like, you know, spots that are a little bit darker because you can see the nori. If you have too much rice, the sushi won't close when you wrap it around. It'll be too stuffed. And with this kind of sushi, it's really best to just do like one, maybe two fillings, just little skinny pieces. All right. So trying to make this rice as even as possible, bringing it close to the bottom. Okay. I also want my nori to be right against the bottom of the sushi mat. Okay, so my fingers are sticky, I'm dipping again, but I don't want to get all that water over everything, so you can keep a towel nearby. You can grab another towel. All right. You want a little bit of moisture, but not a lot. Okay, so I'm gonna take some pieces of cucumber. And actually, another good tip, I forgot to mention, if you can take a tiny bit more rice and line it up, sort of make a dam at the very top. Not too tall, but this is basically going to help you hold your fillings in. You're still leaving that little bit of nori uncovered, but you're making like a little rice dam. Okay, so now these toppings go right up against that dam. And I might try to fit some carrots as well. Don't want to overstuff. Always better to understuff on the first try. You can always do it again. Okay. So here's the rolling part. You're going to use your pointer finger and thumb to hold on to the edge of the mat and use the rest of your fingers to kind of hold the fillings in place. And you just pull and tuck up and over and just fit it right at the edge of that nori that was uncovered. So I'm going to rinse that rice off my hands that I just got. And the benefit of having an actual mat is that it helps you like form the shape. So here's where you can decide if you want your sushi to be like flat on the top and sides, or if you want it to be more like an arch and a flat bottom. But you're gonna give a little bit of force, not too much, but you want to make it nice and tight. Then you lift up the end a little bit and you can roll it a tiny bit more to get the rest of that nori. And again, you want to keep it nice and tight. Give some good force there. Carefully uncover. And here's your sushi roll. So I'm going to show you, just for the sake of time, I'm going to show you how to cut this as well. So I have my knife, my nice sharp knife, and I'm dipping my towel in water. I want to make sure that my knife is wet when I'm cutting, and I'm going to wipe it off in between each cut because rice gets really sticky. Another thing you can do is dip the tip of your knife in and then tip it upside down and let that water drip down the blade. So we're going to cut this right in half. Again, as few swipes as possible, just like cutting the fish. Then you can put one over the other. Got a little bit of rice sticking out the ends, but that's all right. Okay, again, I'm dipping the tip of my knife and I'm letting the water drip down the edge of the blade. And you can either do 1, 2, 3 cuts to make 4 pieces, or you can do 1, 2 cuts to make 6 pieces. I'm going to do 2 cuts. So try to do 1 swipe Again, dipping my knife, letting the water drip down. If you have any sticky rice on there, wipe it off onto a towel. Dip the tip of your blade, let the water drip down. And cut the other pieces. All right. And here's our little cute sushis. These are maki sushi. So I have some, you know, the ends are a little bit messy. You flip those upside down. That's the trick. So I'm gonna put these on a platter and I'm gonna move on to the next one. Kelsey and Camber, since you're cooking along, please let me know if you have questions. Samantha, real quick, can you show the slide for the uramaki?
Yep, 1 second.
Right, so I've got a little platter here. I'm gonna put the sushi here on this platter. Okay, so just so you can see the difference, there was the maki, here's uramaki, rice on the outside. Okay, so we start this one a little bit differently. The way we're gonna do this is we take our half sheet of nori. This time we want, let's see, we want the shiny side facing up again, because that's the part that the rice sticks to. Or sorry, the rough side facing up. There's the rough side. There's this little bit smoother, shinier side. Once you're touching this and getting to see what it feels like, you'll see the difference better. But here's our nori. I'm gonna bring my bowl of water over from my hands. Okay. And here, this time, we're not leaving a little 1/4 inch at the top uncovered, and we're not doing a dam either. We're just fully covering this nori with rice. Full coverage. And this time, you don't have to worry so much about it being too thick, because the rice is not going on the inside of the roll. You don't want it to be crazy thick, because then your piece of sushi is just going to be huge, but you don't need to worry about it like hogging space from the fillings. Okay, getting sticky, I'm dipping in water. I want you to see, I'm just like going like this under the water to get all the stickiness off. Okay. I'm just putting little pieces of rice in all the empty spots that I have. Want to go all the way to all the edges. Doesn't have to be perfect, but want to do our best here. Okay, so that's basically filled in. So what I'm going to do at this point, because that rice needs to be on the outside, I'm going to use my mat, my sushi mat, to help me flip it. So I'm putting my sushi mat down. Let me see, I probably want to do, I'll line up the bottom of the sushi mat at the bottom of the rice here. And then just like pick it up underneath. It's a little tricky, but I flipped it. There we go. Got it. Okay. So now we're going to put the fillings on top of the nori instead. And like I said, we have more room this time, so we can do all of the toppings. And we're going to kind of put them like sort of in the middle this time. And this is not the only way this can be done. There are a lot of different ways that these sushis can be rolled. Maybe different techniques resonate more with you. So if you're still like wondering, or if you're trying it and it's not really clicking, there are tons of videos online to help. All right, so I've got, oh, avocado I want to do this time. Don't want to go crazy with the number of fillings I do here, but
We have a question for you.
yeah.
Could sushi work with a different grain like farro or quinoa, or do they lack that sticky factor that rice has?
That's a really good question. They tend to not be sticky enough, honestly, because those are like very hardy grains that have really hard outside shells, or not shells, but husk of the grain. So those tend to not be quite as sticky. You could do like pearl barley maybe, and like cook it until it's very soft, and that could work. But let me do carrots too, so I have everything. But yeah, rice gets exactly as sticky as we need it to get. All right, so from here, again, holding on to the edge with my pointer finger and my thumb, using my fingers. And this time I'm wrapping around the toppings. You can still see there's some of this left that I haven't touched yet. I'm gonna use my force here to hold it, try and form it into shape, and then we're gonna roll over this remaining part. So I'm squeezing this together, trying to squish everything in there. I'm lifting up just the end, roll it a tiny bit more. And now I'm forcing it together again. So you definitely want to use like a good amount of pressure to condense everything to get all the rice to stick together and keep its shape. And here we go. Here's our next roll. Oh, a little piece of avocado popped out the end. I can just cut that off. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to cut this one as well, for the sake of time. So I know we're after 6:30. If any of you have to go, I completely understand. But I appreciate anyone that's sticking around. Okay, so again, I don't want any sticky rice stuck to my knife. So I'm going to wipe it off on a towel. And I'm going to show you here. I'm dipping the tip of my knife in the water and letting that drip of water go all the way down the blade. So it has water all the way down. Not a ton, it's just a drip, but I'm cutting in half. Okay. Put them one above the other. I'm wiping off anything that came off onto my blade. Dipping the tip of my knife and letting the water drip down. And again, I'm going to do 6 pieces. So you definitely want a really sharp knife, and you can't really rush this process. You have to be super careful to get through that nori without squishing everything. Okay, dipping the knife, letting the water drip down the blade, and doing the last swipe here. You can honestly feel it as you're cutting through. You can feel the blade puncture the nori, and then you know you're safe. You're not going to squish it. So here's our uramaki, our inside out sushi. I'll put that on my platter too. Again, if you have any ends that are a little bit funny looking, just put them upside down, or you can cut them off. Right. So we've got 2 kinds of sushi here. There is one more I want to show you all. For those of you that can stick around. I have to rip a new piece of nori to do that. This one is called temaki. This is a hand roll, it's called. So with the 2 rolls that you just did, we did kind of like the small versions of them by doing half of a nori sheet. You can also do a full sheet not so much with the maki, but with the uramaki, you can do a full sheet. So this one is like a fun little, this is not so like structured as the other two. So yeah, Samantha, you want to go back to just the camera view? All right, perfect. So we can use the sushi mat. We don't even need to, but we can use it just because it's less sticky than the cutting board. So again, the rougher side is the one that's going to touch the rice. This is the side that's a bit smoother. This is the rougher side. That's what's going to go with the rice. I got to dip my hands in the water. All right. So this is sort of, you're only putting rice and fillings on 1/2 of the nori. Because if you saw that picture on the slide, it gets rolled over. This might be a little bit too much rice. I don't want to overdo it. Okay, so I've got rice like just on 1/2. And the top of this is going to be open. So you can kind of like nicely arrange your fillings. You want to kind of have them like, you know, come to a point a little bit if you can. Carrots. Again, always better to underfill than overfill. So just be cautious with that. I'm going to do a little avocado. Not too much. I'm gonna add my salmon in here. This might be overfilled. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll take out this piece of avocado that's sticking out. Okay. So from here, what we do is we take this corner and we tuck, again, you're like pulling it with your thumb and pointer finger. You're using the rest of your fingers to hold the fillings in place. You tuck this up. And then you're rolling this over. And it makes like a cone shape. That sticks out a little bit. Let me see. We can also do, yeah, that makes more sense. We flip it around. And this is still open. You can use a little bit of like sticky rice as glue, basically. You can just kind of like mush it into the corner there and wrap that around as glue. And you have this cute little like sushi ice cream cone. So this kind of thing, you can drizzle your sauces on top. You could also have drizzled your mayo on the inside as well before you wrapped it up. You can sprinkle a little bit of sesame seeds on it, like sprinkles on ice cream. So I'll put that on the platter too, so you can see everything. But these are the 3 types of sushi that we made tonight. And I didn't drizzle any of my mayo yet, so I have to do that. I'll drizzle it over the uramaki. Again, do a little bit of sesame seeds. And here we go. So we're 11 minutes over. So thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around. But I hope that this was a helpful guide of 3 different kinds of sushi you can make. This, the maki, I think is definitely the easiest. You can also be the judge based on what you saw. What do you all think you would like to try of these 3 options? Feel free to unmute.
All 3, they all look amazing.
Yeah, they all look great.
I'm so glad. I'm gonna do a gallery view so it captures, oops, so it captures on the recording. But Kelsey and Camber, where are you at? What stage are you at? See. Nice, you just rolled the uramaki. Cool. Well done. That's great. Yeah, I'm gonna send the recording to everybody afterwards, so you can pause it if I'm going too fast and you can do it again. And yeah, if you don't have one of these mats at home, you can use just a piece of parchment paper, or I folded a dish towel in half and I put plastic over that. So you can do, you don't need the sushi mat. It is a little bit more helpful because it gives some of that structure with the bamboo slats, helping you keep things in place, but you don't need it. You really don't need it. So any last questions before we wrap it up?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. Have a great night. I'm so happy you all enjoyed it. And I hope to see you here again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so, so much. Have a great night.
Have a great night. Thanks so much.